Hello, fellow Christians living in these last days. I want to make this video to give us an insight into the prophetic tone of the prophetic season that is referred to as the last days. This is very deep. This is very enlightening. I am aware a lot of Christians have not received grace to understand the deep things of the Word of God. And this video is intended to educate and to inform people so that none may be lost to the devil out of spiritual or scriptural ignorance. So the title of this video is The Agenda of God for the Last Days. And let me just quickly compare this with the first coming. Of course, we know that the last days has to do with the prophetic season before the second coming of Christ for the rapture. But let me just quickly make reference to the first coming. There was also a prophetic season. There was a period before the first coming, and there was an agenda, and on that agenda there were three items. The first agenda was that the children of Israel should be in bondage of slavery in a foreign land, in Babylon. And that was to last for 70 years, according to the prophecy of Jeremiah, and that's in Jeremiah chapter number 29, verse 10. And so that happened. So that was the first item on that agenda before the first coming. And then after 70 years, they were to be released to return to Judea to build the temple in Jerusalem. So that was the second item, the release from slavery to return to Judea and to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Now, the third item on the agenda is that there was supposed to be a period of divine quiescence. That's the time that God was quiet with the children of Israel. God refused to send prophets at that season. And then only the Levitical priests were doing the little that they could at the time. And that was the third item on the agenda. And it's after the expiration of that time, that unspecified period of divine quiescence, that the sign that was given to prophet Isaiah was to be fulfilled. And that sign is recorded in Isaiah chapter 7, that a virgin shall conceive and give birth to her man child by the Holy Ghost, and that the name of that child shall be Emmanuel, which is interpreted to mean God in the flesh, God with us, God with man. Okay, so that was the divine agenda of God for the first coming of Christ. Now, I want to now focus on the purpose of this video. What is the agenda of God for the last days? That's the prophetic season preceding the second coming of Christ for the rapture. Number one item on that agenda is the revival. You recall the prophecy of Joel, chapter number 2, verse 28 to 30. Joel said, "It shall come to pass afterwards, God shall pour out his spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." That prophecy of Joel is to manifest in the last days. And that prophecy is very crucial, because that prophecy is going to bring about the revival of the last days, which is intended by God to prepare the saints of Christ for the rapture. Now, that prophecy had two seasons of manifestation. The first season was at the Pentecost. And if you make reference to Acts of the Apostles, chapter number 2, verse 15 to 18, Apostle Peter, after the Pentecost experience, made reference, said, this is the prophecy that Joel talked about. And then Peter said that it shall come to pass in the last days, whereas Joel said afterwards. So that was a prophetic word projecting the second manifestation of that Joel's prophecy to the last days. And that prophecy, the Lord gave me understanding, had started happening, because that prophecy is supposed to manifest for 7 years, because there are strict timelines for the prophetic manifestation of the last days. So from the middle of 2016, that's when that prophecy of Joel started. And I, talking to you by the mercies of God and by the faithfulness of God, I'm a beneficiary of that prophecy. So that prophecy is to raise Christian ministers for the last days, and is to generally prepare the saints of Christ for the rapture. Now, the impact of that prophecy on the beneficiaries is to purge and purify you and sanctify you in readiness for the rapture. And then the second effect is to bestow you with the spirit of wisdom and understanding, so that you understand the prophecies of the last days and their fulfillment, as well as the mysteries, the manifestation of the mysteries of the last days. Because the mysteries are a manifestation that if you are not careful out of ignorance, you can fall into the snare of the enemy and then receive the mark of damnation on your soul. So the very essence of your Christianity will be lost simply out of ignorance. And you know the devil thrives of ignorance, on fear, on deceit. Those are the three weapons of strategy for the enemy. All right, so that's the first item, the revival of the last days. And the target population is the saints of Christ, and the purpose is to prepare them for the rapture. The second item is the fulfillment of the prophecies of the last days. And if you make reference to Matthew chapter 24, Jesus Christ was answering the question, what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And then you see the signs that Christ gave in Matthew 24 from verse 3. And then it's verse 8. Christ told them, this is not the end. This is the beginning of sorrows. And the beginning of sorrows means that it shall be like, labor pains that women experience when they want to put to bed. That it shall happen frequently, infrequently rather, and mildly, and then closer to the day of the rapture, they shall become very frequent and very intense. Now, beyond the signs of the beginning of sorrows, as a Christian living in the last days, it is important for you to understand that there are critical prophetic signs of the last days. And those are in the book of Revelations. In fact, 100% of the book of Revelations is about the mysteries, the prophecies of the last days, and then the heavenly activities and events that will take place after the rapture. So now, Revelation chapter number 8 highlights three prophetic signs, and I'm going to mention them quickly and in sequence. Take note that these signs are in sequence, unlike the signs of the beginning of sorrows. The first one is bush and forest fires. That's 1/3 of the bush and forest shall burn, and that has been going on in the world. That's what the world called wildfires. The second one is disasters from the sea. That's happening in many countries of the world. The third is disasters from the river. That's happening in many countries of the world. The fourth, sometimes triggered by torrential rain causing flash floods and destruction of lives and property. The fourth is darkness involving 1/3 of the earth. But that's referring, by my understanding, to the kingdom of darkness. And that's symbolic because the fifth and the sixth sign are coming from the kingdom of darkness. Now, Revelation chapter number 9 carries two signs, and those two signs are from the devil. The fifth sign is from the bottomless pit, and that's demonic locusts that happened in Saudi Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula, and it spread through North Africa, East Africa to South Asia. And that happened in June 2019. You can confirm that on the internet. Now, the sixth sign is plagues that is to come out of the sea by a demonic beast, Lucifer, that manifested from the sea and released those plagues to kill 1/3 of the population of men. Well, you can ask yourself, is there any plague ongoing in the world? That was recorded in China in December 2019, and then it became a global problem, a global pandemic in March 2020. And that sign is a sign of satanic warfare against the saints of Christ in the last days. You can find that in Revelations 9, verse 13 to 21. Now, the seventh sign is the wrath of God and is contained in Revelation 16. And let me just quickly run down because those are in sequence. And that's the next sign we are even expecting from middle of 2023, which is next year. This video is made on the 9th of the 29th of August, 2022. So by the middle of 2023, the wrath of God is going to take place. And that's recorded in Revelation 16. The first one is the first wrath of God is a painful sores that will appear on the body of only those that have worshipped the image of the beast or those who have received the COVID-19 vaccine. The second sign is disasters from the sea, continuing from the previous one. The third one is disasters from the river, and that, when you hear disasters from the river, it's talking about disasters from fresh water. A couple of times it's triggered by torrential rain. And then the fourth one is heat waves, and some countries are already experiencing that because of extreme atmospheric temperatures. The fifth sign, and take note, all these signs are occurring in sequence. The fifth sign is going to be the divinely programmed destruction, disaster of the Vatican City in Rome. The sixth sign is going to be the war in Israel, and Israel shall be conquered. Israel shall be conquered, and that will be the fulfillment of the prophecy from Jesus Christ, that Israel will not remain a nation to witness his second coming, because they rejected him at his first coming. You can find that in Luke chapter number 19, verse 42 to 43. It's also in Matthew chapter number 23, I think verse 38. Okay? So now, after that, once you hear that there's a conquest, there's a war between Israel and one of his neighbors, and suspecting Syria, and Israel is conquered, you know that the hour of your redemption is near. And the next sign after that is the rapture. And after the rapture is the Armageddon battle, which you find in Revelation 16, chapter number 16. And then, verse 16. And then verse 17 and 18 and 20 is talking about the apocalypse, the utter and terminal destruction of the earth. So those are the prophetic signs that are coming. And then that's how they are. And then the third item on the agenda of God for the last days is the satanic warfare, which I've already talked about. That's the sixth sign which the devil is using for warfare. And it's that warfare that will lead to the great tribulation. In other words, the persecution of the saints of Christ for refusing to worship the image of the beast. Some other videos, like if you're interested in the great tribulation, I've done a video on the great tribulation. I've done a video on enforcement of the great tribulation. So that will give you insight to understand, some of these mysteries of the last days. I think with that, I can stop this video there. So I want to thank you for your attention, and God bless you all.